for someone who's never seen it before, strongman can be hard to understand. There are competitions where the events are just never the same. Generally, the competitions have 5 events if it's a one-day show, or anywhere from 6 to 10 events if it's a multi-day show. At World's Strongest Man, we have a group stage and a final stage, each with 5 or 6 events in it, and the events always change. So what makes Strongman Strongman? I'm going to go today through every single Strongman event and explain them briefly and try to get this all in about 10 minutes so that you can understand everything about the sport. Now, a competition consists of a relatively similar set of events. We generally have a hinge, like some sort of deadlift, a push or a press, like a log press, overhead press, some type of moving event, some type of Atlas stone, and then some type of grip challenge. Now, we can throw in squats, we can throw in truck pulls, we can throw in a variety of different things, but those are kind of the staples of a strongman show. Now, without further ado, let's get into these events. One event that's going to be in nearly every competition is a deadlift, but not all deadlifts are created equal. In strongman, we can do deadlifts for max, we can do deadlifts for reps. We can also do deadlifts from the floor or from elevation. When they're from elevation, we can use a variety of bars. Now, the bars that we could use an axle, which is a very thick bar, very difficult to hold onto, and we'll use straps to strap onto that, as we do for all deadlifts, but there's no flex in the bar at all. We then work our way up to a standard barbell, then to a deadlift bar, which bends more than a standard barbell, then to an elephant bar, which bends more than a deadlift bar, to a hammer tire deadlift, which bends more than an elephant bar, onto a silver dollar deadlift, which bends more than a hammer tire bar. Now, in and around that, it is still pulling the weight off of the ground to lockout, where you're stood upright with your shoulders back and hips locked out. The most common elevated deadlift is an 18-inch deadlift, which for most competitors falls just below the knee. This is a test of back power more than leg power, as a deadlift off the floor requires a lot of legs to explode that weight up and be able to get it to lockout. So deadlift is going to be seen in most competitions, although it varies quite a bit what the deadlift is actually going to be. Next up, our second leg test of strength, much less common to see in strongman shows, but squatting. Not uncommon, not seen, but I personally have done 2 squat competitions or squat events in my 25 strongman shows. Now, you can have a standard squat. We'll have a bar. Generally, you have to squat to pads. We don't do powerlifting where there's a depth with the hip of the knee. You just squat to a predetermined fixed end position. We could have a squat machine, or introduced in the Shaw Classic, we could have a leg press where we leg press a car, which in terms of movement pattern is also a squat. Now, squat is almost always for reps. It was only max in recent history one time at the Arnold Strongman Classic where they wore suits on a cambered bar and squatted max weight down to a predetermined position on the pads, which again, is going to be predetermined based on the individual's height. Next up, another iconic strongman event, and the one that I tell most people when they don't know what strongman is the Atlas stone. Now, Atlas stones are very, very different. They all come in different circumferences. They're made with different materials. The tacky or the sticky stuff we put on our arms behaves differently, and sometimes we're not allowed sticky stuff at all. Now, these could be a series of stones, and in those series of stones, it generally goes from lighter to heavier stones. And then it could be with a run-in that gets progressively shorter, or it could be with platforms that get progressively shorter. So you're lifting the lightest stone to the highest platform, heaviest stone to the lowest platform, so on and so forth. We could also have a stone for max. We could also have stone for reps. We could also have stone to shoulder. In the end, it's going to be a spherical concrete ball that we're demanded to move from A to B somewhere. B is either going to be a platform, over a bar, or onto our shoulder. On rare occasion, and it's become more popular recently, we may be asked to press these overhead, although that's with substantially less weight than we would load to a platform. As an example, you might be asked to press 265 pounds overhead as a standard weight, and a standard weight of the heaviest Atlas stone is going to be somewhere around 440 pounds. Next up are some moving events. First is the yoke. The yoke is a weight that you put on your back, you pick that up, and you walk that across. The best way to think of this is like an inverted field goal in football. You carry the crossbar across your back. It's going to be very, very heavy, sometimes upwards of 1,500 pounds. We'll move this for anywhere from 10 to 20 meters, and fastest time wins. Same situation with farmer's walk. Farmers are 2 handles that you're going to carry by your side. Take them from A to B. Again, speed is the determining factor. Very rarely would you ever see a yoke or a farmer's from max. It's always a predetermined weight that you're going to try to move faster than your other competitors. Moving on to overhead events. Like I said, these are always in strongman shows in one form or another, just like the deadlift. Those are probably the two things you can guarantee. In terms of overhead, there are three major overhead events. That is log, axle, and dumbbell. A log is a spherical shaped, a tubular shaped object, generally 12 inches in diameter. And the job is to roll this up your body, get it onto your shoulders, press overhead, and lock out. The other common overhead implement, which I hold the world record, is the axle clean and press. Just like the deadlift, this is a thick bar where you're going to have to go over under grip, pull it up to your stomach, and either midair or on your stomach, flip your hand over. When it's on your stomach, then you have to get it to your shoulders, press overhead. In both of these instances, we could do this for max, we could do this for reps, or we could do it as part of a medley where we have several overhead events stacked together. Regardless, most weight or most reps or fastest time through the medley completed will win this event. The third most common overhead is the monster dumbbell. Now, these are very, very large, just like the log, 12 inches in diameter more often than not. You have to get it with two hands onto the shoulder, press out, lock it out overhead, and you will get a down command if so. Now, the challenge with monster dumbbells is we have 12 inches, which is standard in terms of diameter. We have a sear dumbbell, which is 10 inches and much more compact. And then at World's Strongest Man in 2023, we were introduced all the way up to 14 inches in diameter, which when you look at it, it's nearly impossible to hold that on your shoulder. The challenge here can be varied. It could be that the handle is particularly thick or thin, or the dumbbell head is wide, or could be longer than others. Important thing to recognize with everything I've talked about so far, there's almost no standardization to anything. And that is kind of the beauty of strongman. You can't rely on your home dumbbell being the same as the dumbbell in the show. And oftentimes they're making equipment particularly for the show, so it's impossible for you to get your hands on it in the first place. For anyone out there trying to get into strongman, don't worry so much about what implements you particularly need to get. Worry more about training the movement patterns. If you want to become a strongman and you want to do this in a commercial gym, I've linked my commercial gym strongman program down below where I teach you how to do the strongman implements and the movements without actually having the implements themselves. Next up are going to be our pulling events. And there are two ways that we pull objects. One is arm over arm, where it's out in front of us and we'll pull with a rope. Second is if the rope and the vehicle or object is behind us, we lean into it with a harness and we have a rope in front of us and we pull that way. A plane pull, a truck pull, a train pull, some of the most iconic, recognizable strongman events. In these circumstances, one interesting thing that people don't realize is it's much less about the weight of the object and much more about how the wheel turns, the pressure in that wheel, and the friction between the wheel and whatever surface you're on. If you take a Mack truck, an 18-wheeler, load it full of lead, pump the tires up as much as possible, and put it on a smooth surface, a grandmother could pull that. It might not be as fast as someone else, but it will not be that hard. World's Strongest Man has recently gone away from these types of pulls for that reason. It can be very difficult to parse out competitors and get a dispersion of times because it's so much more dependent on the parameters around the vehicle rather than the vehicle itself. When I won World's Strongest Man in 2023, there was a truck pull that was a city bus, and the city bus was fairly light. I pulled it in 22 and change seconds. And then there were, I believe, 7 competitors, all in 23 point something. Well, this makes sense for a 200-meter dash in a strongman competition where you're trying to test pure strength. This was ultimately a failure, but a failure because of happenstance. It can be very, very difficult to get this right as a promoter. Also, this is probably the reason that most promoters don't do truck pulls, because it is so difficult to figure out how to do it well. Next up is throwing. Again, people love this. When I post throwing content on social media, it always tends to go off. And we generally throw either kettlebells, kegs, or sandbags. Regardless, we face away from a bar, we throw it back up over our head. Oftentimes the bar is 15 feet. Oftentimes we're doing this in a series, although we can also do it for maximum weight. And I held the keg toss world record for a period of time in 2024. Now, in this, the job is to be as explosive as possible, to carry the weight as high as possible, and get the trajectory perfectly. This is as much about technique and precision as it is about explosive power. When it comes to the feeling of the differences between sandbag, kettlebell, and keg, it's not as different as you would think. You won't really see someone really good with a keg and really bad with a sandbag. It just has to do with the rhythm that you throw that object with. If you have a competition coming up and you have a keg toss and you're training on a sandbag, it's not going to be that difference. The only points of advice I can give on this is the more that you use aggression, the better you're going to do with a stiffer object. As in, if you really try to launch a sandbag and you have a lack of rhythm, it's going to be difficult. But if you try to launch a keg with less rhythm, it will be okay. Next up is loading races. These are really fun, and these are where strongman, to me, is most pure, because the loading race could have anything. I've used anvils, I've used sandbags, I've used kegs, I've used, you name it, I've probably used it carrying it from A to B. They will start on a predetermined position. From that position, we load it onto platforms. Now, you're not going to be trained for this, and we are never trained for this. We generally don't know exactly what we're getting into until we rock up. At World's Strongest Man in 2023, we were told there was going to be a loading race, and part of that loading race was 3 wide logs tied together with ropes. They weren't that heavy, but you couldn't really grab the ropes. You couldn't really get your hands around the log, and we had about 10 or 15 minutes to figure out how we were going to do it to be able to go compete the next day. Next up is front carries. Front carries could include a stone, the Husafell stone being the most famous. It could include a sandbag. It could include a Conan's wheel, where we have weight in the crook of our elbow walking in a circle. Regardless, these front-loaded events are exhausting on the quads and on the low back. The difficulty here is trying to breathe as the weight sits on your chest, and ultimately, it's hold on until you gas out. This is a true test of grit and determination as much as anything else. We then have flipping events, and there's 2 flipping events that you may see. One is Fingal's Finger, where it's a big long tube. We push it up over our head and walk it with our hands to flip it to the other side. And the other is tire flips, which have largely fallen out of favor due to copious amounts of bicep tears, though it's coming back at the Strongest Man on Earth this year. So we'll have to be prepared for that. But tire flipping, oftentimes it will be a predetermined number of flips or a set distance from A to B, and often it is a speed race. You will never see a tire flip for max in modern strongman because biceps would go left, right, and center. Lastly, we have sandbags. Sandbags are much like Atlas stones now. Throwing sandbags have a handle on them and are quite small. These are different to the sandbags I'm talking about, which are quite long and wide. I've had a sandbag as wide as 4 feet that I had to pick up, and they are just pure dead weights. This is a really good alternative to Atlas stones if you can't train Atlas stones, because they behave the same way. They sit as dead weight on the ground. You have to really dig your hands into them to try to pick them up. And even when you pick them up, they're not perfectly comfortable ever. We could carry these from A to B. We could put these on our shoulder, or we could put them over some sort of bar, load them over a bar out in front of us. So those are all the strongman events, all the major strongman events. A competition will put together 5 of these or 6 of these or 8 of these or 10 of these. We never really know until we're told. And you put those together, whoever accumulates the most points will win the show. This is the difficulty of strongman. You cannot prepare specifically for what you need to do, and often we'll only get the events 10 weeks in advance, so we have to just prepare as best we can over that period of time, make sure our movement patterns are strong. So if you want to be a strongman, train your push, pull, squat, hinge, overhead press, and carry. And if you're not a strongman, those 6 things are the fundamental movement patterns of life anyway, and you should be training those the best you can. If you don't know where to start, again, the link to my programs is down in the description, and you could do a commercial gym strongman, or you could do any sort of general training program. Go ahead and check those out if you want my help and you want to join Team Moose. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Until tomorrow, lift heavy and be kind, and we'll see you then.